Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons.
Tonight, a done deal, according to the White House.
China has agreed to open their markets to the United States separately of this deal. And when it comes to this deal, we're going back to the terms that were agreed upon in Geneva for the release of some of those critical minerals and the magnets from China to the United States.
The late-night agreement on a trade framework between the U.S. and China that included rare earth materials and more. The fine points of the deal still being hammered out. The next steps for negotiators. And how markets reacted to even more uncertainty when we speak ahead with the chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, Stephen Miran, up ahead.
Plus, with crude oil jumping to a 2-month high today, we'll be joined by the Energy Secretary Chris Wright to discuss what happens next, the outlook for American oil production, and his push for nuclear energy and more.
And California Governor Gavin Newsom takes on the president.
Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived. What Donald Trump wants most is your fealty, your silence to be complicit in this moment. Do not give in to him.
As tensions remain high in Los Angeles with protests now in their 6th day, an overnight curfew expected for a second consecutive evening and hundreds now arrested. The political fight being waged over the role of the military on the ground. We'll speak with former Health Secretary and California gubernatorial candidate Xavier Becerra on that and much more coming up.
But we begin this evening with a trade framework agreed to by the U.S. and China late last night in London after 2 days of talks. President Trump taking to Truth Social today to celebrate, writing, quote, "Our deal with China is done, subject to final approval with President Xi and me," and saying that Beijing will be supplying rare earths and magnets up front. Still, the full terms of the agreement are not yet clear. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who took part in the negotiations, rushed back from London to testify on Capitol Hill today, declaring the U.S. is getting, quote, unimaginably good trade deals without providing many specifics. He also touted today's inflation data as fantastic, as CPI came in cooler than expected for the 4th consecutive month. And joining us now for more on all of it is Bloomberg's Kate Davidson. So, Kate, if we begin with this trade framework with China, I'm confused as to what progress really was made and what actual details we really can count on here.
Right. I think that a lot of people are wondering that, Kaylee. I mean, certainly there was a big shift in these negotiations that sort of cemented that the export curbs are now up for negotiation. So that was a change. But it does feel like we're essentially back to where we were the Sunday or Monday after these talks in Geneva. Everyone has agreed, OK, we're going to go back and we're going to stick with what was agreed upon then. But as you said, not really many specifics and not exactly clear where things go from here.
That would also imply, though, that reciprocal tariffs currently on hold would still take effect a month from now when we reach that August deadline, or was there an agreement to put them on hold further?
It's a good question, Joe. I mean, I'm not sure that we have clarity on that.
Well, we do have a little bit more clarity on the inflation picture after we got fresh data on CPI today. Kate, for the 4th month in a row, comes in cooler than expected. What does that mean for a Federal Reserve as it weighs its next decision next week?
Yeah, so as we all know, the Fed likes to go very slow. So I don't think it means anything different for them for the meeting next week. I think it's pretty locked in that they're not expected to do anything. They will just hold steady, as they've been saying. Look, I think what Fed officials are really looking for is more certainty, which we were just talking about on trade, right? But kind of across the board, I think that they are going to be reluctant to lower interest rates again or raise them if the moment calls for it until they know where the economy is headed, until they can, I guess, reasonably assume that the tariff rates aren't going to change again or that there's not going to be some kind of new deal that's going to meaningfully change the trajectory for the economy. But no doubt the tame inflation data should be reassuring for them. I think if you look under the hood, what we're seeing is that there were some categories of goods that were more exposed to tariffs that didn't rise as much as people thought. Some did go up. I think household appliances went up. Toys went up quite a bit. But on the services side, we're seeing price gains are much slower. Some prices actually decline. Sectors like airfare and hotel stays, that could be a sign that businesses are reluctant to pass on higher prices because of weakening demand from consumers, which isn't great either. So I think that overall it should be reassuring to them, but probably won't change much of their view on where things are headed, certainly next week.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Bloomberg's Kate Davidson getting us started here as we bring you now live to the White House for a conversation with Stephen Miran, the chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Mr. Chairman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. A lot of smiles, and certainly at the White House here to see CPI once again coming in softer than expected. Does President Trump have Jay Powell to thank for that?
Look, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me back. Look, I think that the president has delivered below expectation inflation for 4 months in a row, and every month he's in office. And I think that says something about our policies. Our policies push the supply side of the economy out, and in doing so, help firms produce more with less. So, I think inflation has been very successfully coming down, and all the Chicken Littles and doomsayers still have very little to show for themselves.
Well, when we consider what Kate was just telling us about, Mr. Chairman, this idea that companies and firms may be reluctant to pass on any higher costs that they're facing due to tariffs for concern that the consumer demand won't be there to tolerate those price hikes, when could that actually start being a problem for the economy? If you're not getting the inflationary pressure, but that has implications for growth and bottom lines.
So what you just said, that firms don't think that they'll be able to pass through prices to consumers, is exactly why Americans won't end up bearing the burden of these tariffs. What you've said is that firms don't have the pricing power to do so, which means that ultimately sellers of the goods, the countries that we're tariffing, will have to lower their prices to absorb the tariffs. And that doesn't happen immediately. It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens in the fullness of time. And it comes from what economists call the theory of tax incentives, which basically states that the more inflexible party ends up bearing the burden of the tariff. And just as American consumers are showing that they're not willing to absorb those price hikes, that they're flexible, they can change their patterns of consumption. At the end of the day, other countries will end up eating those tariffs.
But just quickly, Mr. Chairman, how does that incentivize these firms if they have to eat a lot of that cost to invest in things like hiring more workers in the U.S.? How do you expand if you're getting crimped in other areas because you can't pass on higher input costs?
Well, so first of all, firms can alter their supply chains. They can choose where they import from other countries that do cut deals with us, as opposed to countries that don't. They can produce stuff here. That flexibility gives them the ability to go to suppliers and say, if you don't change your behavior, if you don't absorb these tariffs, I'm going to change who I'm buying from. And that leverage, that bargaining power, means they can force others to absorb the tariffs. Now, in terms of investing in America, there are so many incentives we're creating to get firms to invest in America. So if you look at the One Big Beautiful Bill, there's full expensing of equipment, full expensing of R&D, full expensing of new factories, right? These are extremely powerful incentives to invest in America. If you look at the academic literature, the paper from a couple of years ago by Beccera et al., they found that full expensing was the best bang for the buck in terms of investment incentives. And so what those do is they get firms to build more in America, expand the capital stock in America, and that increases the productive capacity of the economy, which helps keep inflation low.
I want to ask you, as part of your equation here to keep inflation low and continue growing, is this reconciliation bill that's moving its way through the Capitol right now. We heard today from Jeffrey Gundlach from Double Line Capital, who's at the Bloomberg Global Credit Forum, and warned of a reckoning coming for U.S. Treasuries, Mr. Chairman, because of our massive and growing debt. Listen to how he put it.
The reckoning is coming is that we have to somehow figure out how we're going to deal with $37 trillion. I mean, we're actually going to hit the 37 trillion number for real. It's still 36.95 trillion, but it's going up quickly. So yeah, there's going to have to be some pretty creative thinking.
Stephen, he says there's an awareness now that the long-term Treasury bond is not a legitimate flight to quality asset. Is he correct?
Look, this administration, the president take the deficit very seriously, and we have a plan to reduce it. And I think that people are overly paying attention to the CBO score of the One Big Beautiful Bill, which exists within the confines of the very particular process for passing things through reconciliation, but doesn't give you the big picture. The big picture is that through tax relief, deregulation, energy abundance, and trade renegotiation, we're going to get GDP growth up to 3%. That's going to create about 1.33 points worth of GDP of deficit reduction. Tariff revenues, tons of money that help bring down the deficit. That will also create about 1 point worth of GDP of deficit reduction. By pushing out the supply side of the economy, by cutting red tape, making an easier environment for businesses to produce, invest, hire, build, tax incentives for investment, expanding the capital stock, incentives to increase labor supply, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on tips. all these push out the productive capacity of the economy, expanding the supply side. And when you increase supply, price pressures come down. By durably bringing inflation down through supply side expansion, interest expenses will ultimately follow. If we return to pre-COVID levels, that will bring the deficit down by over another point of GDP. I just gave you 3 to 4 points of GDP worth of deficit reduction, none of which is really included in the CBO score of the bill, and that's before we even get into waste, fraud, and abuse.
Well, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, in testimony before the House Ways and Means Committee today, was asked directly if this bill would add to the national debt, and he said it remains to be seen. How long will we have to wait to see?
Look, I mean, I just said that I think that we have numerous channels of deficit reduction that are coming through better economic growth, through tariff revenue, through reductions in interest expenses, and through cuts to waste, fraud, and abuse. So I think that it will take some time for those to start manifesting, right? You know, tariff revenue is coming in, but the tax bill isn't law yet. Hopefully within a month it'll be law. Deregulation is proceeding as fast as we can do it. There's a rulemaking process. We are a nation of laws. We are following the rulemaking process. But these things are all moving ahead, you know, pretty decently. And over time, over the next year, over the next couple of years, we will see the deficit start to come down because these factors will bring the deficit down.
We've got the framework in place for a U.S.-China trade deal, Mr. Chairman. I know that you're not in the midst of those talks yourself, but you're, of course, modeling around them. The fact is we've still got tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, that are set to take effect against China next month. And you've told us before that we can work around this, that China is not the only market to supply the demand of U.S. consumers. Now that we're in the throes of this, have you identified those markets?
So there are many markets that we can substitute production from, and it depends on a good-by-good basis, right? But I think that what you'll see is that the purpose of tariffs is to induce countries to lower their barriers to U.S. products. So to create trade deals that result in more balanced trade, but that can also be more trade. And that process will give us the option of additional markets to trade with relative to countries that don't make deals with us. So I'm optimistic, and I hope that China will make a good deal with us. But, you know, things are moving along, and we'll make sure that they live up to their end of the bargain.
Did I frame that question fairly, though, Mr. Chairman? Is that loaded gun of reciprocal tariffs still on the table for August?
You mean, well, look, if we're not making progress in trade negotiations, I think that it very much is on the table. But, you know, the president understands that in negotiations, you know, you want to get to an outcome. And so if changes to tariff rates are conducive to getting to a positive outcome, I would expect them to happen. If they're not conducive to getting to a positive outcome, you know, we'll see. The president is one of the world's best negotiators in history, and he has succeeded in creating hundreds of deals over his many decades of a career. So what we will see is that he will use these tariffs to incentivize countries to move negotiations forward, to make concessions to the United States, and that will result in a fairer trade environment for American workers and firms.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we appreciate you joining us. Stephen Miran, chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Thank you. Coming up, House Senate Republicans are planning to revise President Trump's tax bill that we were just discussing. But first, at least 400 people have been arrested in the greater Los Angeles area since the weekend. We'll discuss the state of the protests with California gubernatorial candidate Xavier Becerra next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The rule of law has increasingly been given way to the rule of Don. The founding fathers, they didn't live and die to see this kind of moment. It's time for all of us to stand up. Justice Brandeis, he said it best. In a democracy, the most important office, with all due respect, Mr. President, is not the presidency, and it's certainly not governor. The most important office is office of citizen.
That was California Governor Gavin Newsom in an address last night, taking on President Trump directly for deploying military to Los Angeles despite his opposition. 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 active duty Marines remain in L.A., where up to 400 arrests have been made after several days of protests, which White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt described this way today.
What we have seen transpire in Los Angeles, California in recent days is shameful. Left-wing radicals waving foreign flags viciously attacked ICE and Border Patrol agents as well as Los Angeles police officers. These criminals injured police, threw rocks at police cars and officers, burned vehicles, shut down freeways, and lobbed Molotov cocktails, all because the Trump administration was removing violent, criminal, illegal aliens from the city.
For reaction here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio, we turn now to Xavier Becerra, California gubernatorial candidate and former attorney general for the state. He's also, of course, the former Secretary of Health and Human Services during the Biden administration. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Obviously, what Caroline Leavitt just described as part of President Trump's justification for sending in military forces, which Gavin Newsom has indeed sued over. Other than taking this to the courts, what cards does the state have to play here?
Well, Kayleigh, I think the governor was correct when he talked about how we're going to take control of running the state of California and our public safety. The police in Los Angeles, the mayor has said it, the governor has said it, had control of the situation. Public safety was being managed. What was not being managed was the way federal agents were conducting their affairs. And while the spokesperson for the White House used all the right buzzwords about criminal aliens, most of the folks that were being arrested were citizens who were peacefully protesting before federal agents got out of hand. And so if you take a close look at these demonstrations, there was one on Sunday that had over 1,000 people, peaceful, not by the ICE agents, not a thing happened. And so it's only when the federal agents start to provoke individuals. And of course, the agitators that always follow these things are the ones that incite the difficult times. And so every one of us should tell those agitators on both sides of these demonstration lines, stay home.
I want to talk with you more, Secretary, and thanks for joining us, about the tone and the posture that the governor has taken toward all this. We got into it last evening with Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. Here's what he had to say about the protests, the governor's response. Listen.
Today's Democrats do what Gavin Newsom does, which is he's suing the Trump administration, saying, do not enforce law and order, do not protect our citizens. I got to say that's backwards. I think we ought to be keeping our city safe, and that should be, regardless of the circumstances, we should be against violence.
When you step back and look at the conversation that we've been hearing publicly between Democrats and Republicans, Secretary, considering your own candidacy in this case, would you handle this? Would a Governor Becerra handle this the same way Gavin Newsom has?
In many ways, yes. I would have acted faster to work with our mayor. I would have contacted ICE. I would have contacted DHS immediately and said that every day we work together, whether it's going after sex trafficking rings, whether it's going after drug interdiction, drug lords who are trying to send drugs into the U.S. We're always working with ICE and Homeland Security. I would have contacted them immediately and said, hey, these types of enforcement actions are always done in a way that we coordinate. You do federal action, we'll do state, local action. And I would have made it very clear that we want that partnership to exist, but we don't want them trying to handle local, state law enforcement, which the U.S. Constitution leaves to the state of California and to the mayors and to the police chiefs in our cities.
Well, you know what we're hearing from Republicans, including the president, on down through Senator Cruz, and I'm sure many in your state of California, is that there are agitators here, in some cases paid protesters, who are throwing rocks and concrete at police officers, and Democrats need to take a harder line. Is there some truth to that?
Absolutely go after anyone who's throwing a rock, anyone who's throwing a bottle, throwing a Molotov cocktail, anyone who's vandalizing, anyone who's trying to do damage to government property or to harm anyone else. Absolutely. But we have police who could do that and have been doing it. We don't need ICE. We certainly don't need to activate our California National Guard, and we certainly don't need military troops to do that. We can handle that. There is no crisis. There is no emergency. The president has used all the buzzwords to manufacture this crisis, and at the same time, what he's trying to do is deflect attention to the real difficulties going on in Washington, D.C., where they're trying to cut health care for seniors and children through this reconciliation bill that's going to really devastate health care, education, clean energy. You know, this is a game they play by using all these buzzwords. You showed the White House press secretary who used all these metaphors for bad things that aren't occurring. If indeed they're arresting all these criminal aliens in these demonstrations, put them forward. Let us see the names. They're simply arresting mostly U.S. citizens, like the labor leader, David Huerta, who has been an active leader defending working men and women for decades. That's the people they're arresting. It's not the criminal aliens. And by the way, if you notice, they're not going after criminal aliens who are selling drugs, who are trying to traffic young girls for sex, they're going to workplaces. They're going to the car wash place. They're going to the restaurants. They're going to places where people are working, getting up in the morning and going to work. That's the kind of thing that sows distrust in our law enforcement. That's why our local law enforcement agencies allow federal government to do immigration. We'll do public safety. The federal government should respect that, obey the Constitution. Let us do public safety. You do your federal immigration enforcement.
Well, Mr. Secretary, you raised healthcare in that answer, and that's where I would like to turn as we consider the decision of your successor as HHS Secretary, RFK Jr., who decided this week to remove all 17 members of the CDC's vaccine advisory panel. How should we consider the ramifications of that decision?
Well, it's both dangerous and foolish. What can I tell you? When I was secretary, every day, and we inherited the worst pandemic in history from the Trump administration, where 3,000 to 4,000 people were dying a day when the President Trump handed the keys over to President Biden, and we had to do everything we could to save lives. We depended on this committee to give us the best guidance on how to use these very important life-saving medicines, these vaccines, because you have to use them right. When, how often, where, and ACIP, this committee on immunization practices, is the committee that guided us because you have 17 experts, 17 scientists who've proven their mettle when it comes to infectious diseases, giving us guidance. So it's not just some secretary, some president, or even a group at HHS making decisions. It's a group of scientists and experts. To just dismiss them, as I said, it's dangerous, but it's also certainly very foolish, very partisan. It's clear that the vaccine deniers are coming to take over, and that's dangerous for everyone.
Well, so can you tell the American people whether or not they should be trusting any guidance or recommendations that are coming out, not only of the CDC, but of any health authority that RFK Jr. has purview over?
Kayleigh, usually I would say to you, as the former secretary of HHS, you should trust the agencies and the experts who are managing all of these affairs when it comes to infectious diseases, healthcare, the science. The difficulty is that the people who are the scientists, the people who are the experts, are the people who are being dismissed. And so it's tough to say at this stage, trust the Department of Health and Human Services, trust the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, when all the scientists and the trusted advisors are being fired. And so it's very difficult. Why are we allowing 2 children to die in Texas of measles, a disease that we had essentially eradicated, that under Donald Trump and RFK's watch have now perished? It doesn't make sense, except that, of course, there is a lack of interest in having our people be vaccinated again. And that's dangerous and, as I said, very foolish.
It's good to have you with us, Sir Xavier Becerra, California gubernatorial candidate, former Health and Human Services Secretary in the Biden administration. We appreciate the insights on Bloomberg. Coming up, how the Department of Energy is rolling back some Biden administration policies, plus the expected cuts at the Energy Department with the One Big Beautiful Bill. We've got an important conversation ahead as we get into these matters and an announcement on LNG production coming up with the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright. He's going to be with us next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
There's denial that tax breaks don't add to the national debt. Was Moody's wrong? Was Representative Massey's assessment wrong?
I can tell you that clearly Representative Massey doesn't understand the bond market, and that any 24-hour window, as he's just said, is incorrect. That I will point out that the U.S. 10-year, which I repeatedly reference, is the only major 10-year bond that has a lower yield this year. So has a lower yield today than it did on January 1st or January 20th.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent answering questions there from Democratic Congressman John Larson of Connecticut, what was an hours-long testimony today on Capitol Hill regarding instability, in that case, in the bond market. But it's the energy sector, specifically crude oil, that had the most notable moves today. And joining us now for more from world headquarters in New York is Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick. Oil prices up. Romaine seemed to put a break on things with our eyes on what's happening in Iraq tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big move higher. Of course, a slew of headlines coming out about the potential evacuation of Americans from the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. That sent crude oil prices spiking. WTI crude, that's the main benchmark here in the United States, going up about 5% on the day. That's the biggest one-day gain that we've seen going all the way back to October. And once we saw those oil prices rise, we did see a dip in stocks. Stocks at one point were in the green, largely because of some encouraging data on the inflation front, basically an inflation report that showed, well, not so much inflation, or at least not as much as expected. And then you had a lot of bets coming in that the Fed could potentially lower rates, partly as a result of that. But again, you see the numbers there on your screen, 5.3% on Brent crude in London, 4.9% on WTI crude here in New York. That took the wind out of the sails, and we saw a reversal in stocks. The S&P ended the day down about 0.3%, but the biggest declines, Joe, was really in those cyclical areas, the economically sensitive areas. Dow Transports, which includes your airlines and your railroads, as well as a lot of your trucking companies, that finished the day lower by 1.6%.
All right, Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, thank you so much. And for more on what we saw in oil specifically, we turn now to the U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright, who is here with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. Mr. Secretary, we appreciate your time, and we have much we want to discuss with you. But if we could begin with the catalyst for the move today, should the global oil market be concerned about a potentially disruptive major event in the Middle East?
Well, Iraq is a very large exporter of oil, so that's definitely going to get the attention of the marketplace. But one of the things that's so fortunate about today is the United States is just by far the biggest producer of oil in the world, and we're a net exporter of oil. Doesn't mean the market's unimpacted by Iraq, but that 5% move might have been a 15% move if you were in a place where U.S. production was modest or declining. But we're a large buffer in global markets.
Well, it's interesting. We heard that forecast from the EIA just yesterday, Secretary, that domestic crude production will, in fact, decline next year for the first time since 2021. I don't know what that means for drill, baby, drill. What does it mean for jobs? Will there be job losses surrounding this decline?
Well, I mean, that's a projection. We don't know what's going to happen next year. The last few months, we've seen weak oil prices for a few months. And if prices are too low for economic incentive, you'll see some drilling reduce on the margin. I think it's unlikely you'll see enough reduction in activity to actually see a decline in production next year. But that really comes down to what oil prices are over the next 6 months and how producers decide to deploy capital. Everything we're doing in this administration is making it lower cost for them to drill wells, and therefore a lower threshold at which they would start to pull back activity.
Well, I ask, when you combine it with all the cuts to clean energy tax credits, do you end up with fewer energy jobs than when the administration started?
Well, look, I don't think so, but I don't think the goal is not to create jobs in any particular industry. The constituency of this president is the American economy and the American consumer. And about 1% of Americans work in oil and gas production. 100% of Americans consume oil and gas. But no, I'm pretty bullish about the economic outlook and the outlook for the energy industry in this country.
Well, what about the outlook for what you were just discussing, actual crude prices? Goldman Sachs, I don't know if you've seen, did an analysis on the president's social media activity and specifically his commentary around oil, and it found that he prefers, or it seems he prefers, oil prices between $40 and $50 a barrel. Mr. Secretary, I don't know if you have thoughts on that specific analysis, but has the president expressed to you a specific price which seems ideal to him?
Now, I mean, I've heard the president's comments. I think what you hear from the president is a passion around lower energy prices are good for Americans. And he's 100% right on that. What Americans care about is the bills they pay. What's the price of gasoline? What's the price to pay my heating bill or fill my truck, or the price of diesel? You'll see all of those major energy prices, certainly fuel prices, are down from when he was inaugurated. And in fact, they're down even more from when he was elected, which started to send the message that there's going to be more production in America and therefore lower prices. But the marketplace sets supply and demand price. More production puts downward pressure on prices.
Mr. Secretary, Kayleigh started our conversation by asking you about what's going on in Iraq right now. And I know as you join us live here from the Energy Department, part of the focus that you have at this time is refilling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Is the $2 billion in the House bill that's moving to the Senate right now enough to refill the SPR?
Oh, not to entirely refill it, but it's enough to start. The first expenditures we have to do is to fix this Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We've got over $100 million of damage because it was drained so quickly in 2022, not for strategic reasons, but for political reasons. We've got to repair the facilities. That's going on right now, and this will allow us to finish that repair. And we have to cancel already agreed additional oil sales. So that's the first use of money. And then with the additional funds, we'll start refilling it. But no, it's going to be a multi-year process to refill the SPR. But we got to work on that every year. Every year we're here.
What is the timeline for the repairs specifically? When do you expect that to be completed?
We hope that most of the repairs are done by the end of this year. They should be done by the end of this year, and we should be able to fill all 4 of them.
Interesting. The president has talked a lot about managing inflation by way of energy prices. He's pleading on one hand with the Fed chair to cut interest rates. But in the meantime, part of the thrust, and you've delivered this message to us before, Secretary, is if you drop the cost of energy, everything else tumbles. Where will be the cost of gasoline this summer as people prepare to travel?
Well, I mean, the price of gasoline today is, I think, about 10% lower than it was a year ago. And hopefully it'll stay around where it is today. I mean, this is the season of higher gas prices, as you just mentioned, because we're getting into travel season. In inflation-adjusted prices, this is the lowest gasoline price we've had in 20 years, except for that brief blip during COVID. So hopefully we'll keep prices around where they are today.
I'd like to ask you, Mr. Secretary, about an announcement the department made today for 20-year contracts that were just signed with JERA, which, of course, is a massive Japanese purchaser of LNG. 20-year agreements to buy LNG from the United States, which, according to the release from the department, will sustain 50,000 jobs annually. How do we go, though, from sustaining jobs to actually creating them? What size deal would that need to be?
Oh, I think that was meant to say create and sustain. Like, there's a lot of new construction that'll be required on these tens of billions of dollar projects to expand these facilities. And then as you sign contracts to export more natural gas, means you've got to produce more natural gas. And the supply chain involved in that production spreads over more than 30 states. But I think if we can pass the one big beautiful bill and solidify through administrations the ability to do efficient approval of LNG exports, I think you'll see many, many more large signings and deals like this for America to supply energy to our friends and allies abroad.
Well, we'd like to hear more about that because obviously lifting the ban on LNG exports was extremely important to you at the Energy Department. What other kind of parties are you talking to? What kind of deal you have for us next?
We're looking across the world. I think European countries are buying more and more LNG from the United States. We're trying to fill that hole from Russian gas that got pulled away. I met with a large group from India today. I think we'll see increased U.S. LNG supply to India all along the Pacific Rim in East Asia and Southeast Asia, which is economically the fastest growing section in the world. What's great about natural gas is it's the fastest growing energy source on the planet. So there's the greatest demand growth for new supplies of natural gas, and the U.S. is the largest supplier of that by far.
Secretary, thanks for joining us. Chris Wright, Energy Secretary, with us live in Washington. Thank you for the conversation as we move now to some of the other major stories that we're following today. Starting off with a Bloomberg exclusive, the Treasury Department is looking into changing rules to revoke tax-exempt status for colleges and universities that consider race in student admissions, scholarships, and other areas, according to people with knowledge of these deliberations. It's a move that could impact the financial stability of hundreds of institutions and tens of thousands of students. The office has been reviewing draft language for the rule change. They could take effect without congressional approval.
And the Trump administration is routinely skipping a form of federal disaster aid that helps states prepare for future storms, flooding, and wildfires. FEMA has rejected requests for this resiliency money, also known as hazard mitigation grants, for states like Iowa, Mississippi, Missouri, and Oklahoma just last week. It's all part of a trend of cost-cutting measures that began in the spring. The president, of course, has reiterated his plan to abolish the agency as soon as the end of hurricane season this fall.
And Elon Musk is stepping back from some of his comments last week about the president, posting his comments, quote, went too far, unquote, after harsh criticism of the commander-in-chief and his one big beautiful bill. Musk's regrets today come just days after Trump threatened the tech billionaire with, quote, serious consequences, and after the spat between the two resulted in a one-day $34 billion loss for Elon Musk's net worth. We'll have much more on that development coming up here on Bloomberg. Also, Senate Republicans plan to release major revisions to President Trump's tax bill. We'll discuss when we assemble our political panel. Coming up next, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's strange to me that you have Republicans who voted for a bill that they apparently dislike and then publicly sent a letter to their Senate Republican colleagues to say, stop these provisions from ever becoming law. I mean, that's the height of irresponsibility. Vote yes and then hope for the best. No, you have a job to do in the House of Representatives, and now you have a second chance.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries with his message for his Republican colleagues earlier today regarding their ability to stop this tax bill. Today on the early edition of Balance of Power, we spent some time with Republican Congresswoman Lisa McClain of Michigan, important as she's chair of the House Republican Caucus, and shared her expectations for the Senate markup of this bill.
I know the Senate is going to put their fingerprints on it. They've already told us they're going to put their fingerprints on it. My hope is that they don't change it too dramatically because we have a very thin margin, and we worked for almost a year and had our family fights, family squabbles, family disagreements on this to put the best, most conservative package on the floor. So, again, I'm optimistic that we'll get this done, hopefully by July 4th.
By July 4th. With us now for their reaction, this evening's political panel with Kristen Hahn, partner at Rock Solutions, our Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain, President CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Great to have you both here. Welcome. Sarah, you just heard from the chair of the House Republican Caucus, hopeful about what comes back from the Senate. Won't the message from the Speaker be, I dare you to vote no, because you'd be allowing the biggest tax cut in modern history?
So Lisa's a very active Main Street member. I had her over at the House yesterday. It won't be the Speaker delivering that message, or probably President Trump delivering that message. Okay, we have to put our family squabbles aside and vote for the bill.
That's what it comes down to, right? If you're in the SALT caucus or the Freedom Caucus, you're not going to vote for a tax increase, I guess, unless your name is Tom Massey.
That's true. Yeah, and he's a unique individual. There's not too many like him. So yeah, we're gonna get this through, and I do think we're gonna get it through before July 4th.
Wow.
I want to play a little bit more of the conversation we had with Chairwoman McClain, chair of the Republican Conference, because we asked her specifically about SALT, and she said that is the number one thing she's concerned about the Senate changing. This is what she told us.
I hope they don't touch SALT too much. And the reason why I say that is because the SALT caucus, which we have here in the House and they don't have in the Senate for obvious reasons, they've been pretty dug in. And I'm not here to say they're right. I'm not here to say they're wrong. But they've been pretty dug in. And that was one of our biggest issues in the House. That just can't be touched.
And yet our reporting from the Senate today, Kristen, is that the Senate actually is looking to take the SALT cap lower than the $40,000 in the House bill. Senator Tom Tillis said they might be looking to put it down at $30,000. Do you think the Senate is aware of how big of a problem that could be in the House?
I think they are, and I think they don't care. So, I mean, I think back to like when the Democrats had control of everything and we were going through the ACA or, Obamacare, those negotiations, the House got through this bill and the members were saying the same thing. on television, hoping the senators were listening. Please don't change this too much. It took a long time. It was very hard for us to do this. The senators are going to do what the senators are going to do, and they're going to send it back to the House, and it's going to be up to, like Sarah said, between the Speaker and the President to make those phone calls and make these members vote for it, even the members of the SALT caucus.
Interesting. Well, it still comes back to the same question. Whether you're in the Freedom Caucus or the SALT caucus, $30,000 a deal breaker? They were negotiating to begin with. Surely Mike Lawler knew that number could change.
He certainly did, but they are tough. They really are going to continue to push for the $40,000. They need it. These are the majority makers. New York, California, New Jersey, they make up the majority in the House of Representatives. Yeah. So they're going to fight right to the very end to try to keep it at $40,000.
Well, when we consider the fights that are underway, the fights that could happen in the future, Sarah, we had Lindsey Graham, the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, suggesting in an interview yesterday that this thing still might need to be broken up into multiple reconciliation packages, that maybe one big, beautiful bill is not actually going to be the ultimate outcome here. You buy it?
Potentially, but I certainly hope not. I mean, the members have talked about that. We certainly talked about it before we got it passed in the House. Like, do we have to split this? Right now, they're hoping one bill. Let's get it back to the House before the July 4th break, and let's get this behind us, because there's a lot of other things coming. And we need to put this to bed. So right now, I still think it's going to be one bill.
Part of the conversation this week has been about Elon Musk and whether his breakup with the president could slow the progress on this bill until, of course, today, apparently we're walking back, or I don't know if we're actually going to be friends again. During an interview with the New York Post, President Trump was asked if he could reconcile his friendship with Elon Musk after, as we told you, Musk had some nice things to say on Twitter that he regretted some of the comments he made. Here's President Trump.
Could you reconcile with him, do you think? Could you forgive him?
I guess I could, but, we have to straighten out the country.
Yeah.
And my sole function now is getting this country back to a level higher than it's ever been. And I think we can do that. I don't know what his problem is, really. I don't know. I haven't thought too much about him in the last little while.
This is after Elon Musk said that some of his comments about the president went too far. I guess that means he won't be donating to Republican or to Democratic campaigns this year. What do you think?
I would be surprised if Elon Musk started donating to Democratic campaigns and, independent expenditures and stuff like that. But it will be interesting. I mean, Elon Musk has a vested interest in a good relationship with Republicans and the government and the President of the United States. He has a lot of business with the government in a number of different sectors. So I think you'll see him try to continue to repair this relationship, and that probably will mean him giving to political campaigns, I would guess.
Well, obviously, this breakdown and I guess maybe halfway reconciliation, or at the very least a truce, has provided us a lot of entertainment in D.C. over the last week. But did it actually fundamentally change anything, Kristen? He had already left DOJ in his formal capacity. It doesn't seem that any Republican lawmaker is saying, OK, Elon Musk changed my mind from where it was previously. So was all of it basically for entertainment value, and that's it?
I mean, it was very entertaining. You should just watch the late shows to see what, Colbert and Seth Meyers, all of them were saying about it. It was very entertaining. But I will say it also didn't change the fact that, if you're a serious lawmaker and you're a serious person about addressing the debt and deficit, what he did not accomplish that. So it also doesn't change the fact that he didn't accomplish his stated goal of coming in and truly reducing the debt and deficit, which is where I think that first tweet came from, like deep down, about this bill, adding trillions of dollars to the deficit, and then it spiraled out of control from there. But yeah, I don't think it changed much of anything.
Well, we're at a point now where a rescissions package that has about $9 billion, I think a little more, that came from DOJ-inspired cuts could be on the rocks. Is that going to pass the House? And if it doesn't, did Elon Musk even matter?
We expect it to pass the House. So Elon Musk, first of all, is anybody shocked that this actually happened?
Sounds like you're not.
I'm not. I'm surprised it took so long. This is what happens.
It took so long.
Right. But no, we intend to get that passed and then pass the next one that's coming. There's a few of these bills coming that will make some cuts. Maybe it won't get quite to the number that Elon Musk was hoping for, but you are going to see some cuts in the federal budget coming.
So rescissions will pass before reconciliation?
They will, absolutely.
And no problems in the Senate?
Not that we can see, no. Not that we understand. It should go through the Senate as well.
Well, so then there's the question of how that actually plays, Kristen, once the cuts are formalized. If it's things like public broadcasting, for example, or USAID. Obviously, you already saw a lot of the outrage about that previously when it was first announced. Does the formalization of it change much optically?
I mean, I think I don't agree with the cuts, but I like to see the legislative branch actually performing their duty. But, you know, as far as the cuts go, I think, yes, as you know, they'll be implemented. And, you know, you're talking about the politics versus the policy, and sometimes they coincide. And so for the midterm elections, if you're looking at places where this really impacts people, and you're seeing some Republican members already concerned about public broadcasting and other things, and then there's also the Medicaid cuts, I think that will have an impact.
I want to ask you about the X date, because it came up today in testimony with Scott Besson, and it plays into this whole conversation because you addressed the debt ceiling in this reconciliation bill. Mm-hmm. The question is, when do we hit the debt ceiling? Can the legislation get done in time? Of course, Sarah says it'll happen by the 4th of July. Secretary Scott Besson was asked about the X date earlier by Democratic Congresswoman Terry Sewell of Alabama. Let's listen.
When do you predict, given where we are right now, will we hit the ceiling?
Some point in the middle to late summer.
Is that August, July?
Again, it is imprecise.
It's kind of a cable guy window when it comes to the X date. Is that enough for lawmakers to be inspired?
They want to get it done before they go out for August
So this
recess.
will be done in reconciliation. We're not going to be talking about a standalone debt limit bill.
We are hoping so. That is the plan as of right now. Because the country, we're tired of fighting about this. As we said last week, it's the one thing that Donald Trump and Elizabeth Warren actually agree on.
Right.
This really should just come off the table, and we should not have to have this fight every year.
The debt limit increase also has to happen.
Has to
reconciliation,
happen.
unless the Republicans want to pass a standalone with Democratic votes.
Yes.
I mean, it's just
And then you have to
the
make
way
a
it is.
deal.
Well, I was going to say, what do
The way
those
it is.
Democratic votes cost if we want to play that game?
Exactly.
What would they use that leverage for in our final minute here, Chris?
I mean, I think, you know, there's not a lot. I mean, the Democrats are focused, like, really on these House seats and taking back the House next year. So, you know,
You could get a fat child tax credit out of it.
I mean, there's that, and then there are things that would have been included in a farm bill that are here. You know, like you know, for kids, and so there are a number of different things. I don't want to project what I think that Jeffries and the leadership might do, but quite a bit.
Well, we'll have to stay tuned to find out. Kristen Hahn, Sarah Chamberlain, our political panel, thank you so much for joining us. And, of course, coverage on all of the stories that we just covered can always be found here on Bloomberg and in our Washington edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
Thanks for joining us. Another interesting day in the Capitol here on Balance of Power, and we'll do it again tomorrow on Bloomberg TV and radio.